Alright, Ascended Heroes is out, but also kind of not out. And depending on whether you're talking about TCG Live or the physical game, the answer is actually different, but only for a couple of weeks. Confusing, right? So instead of jumping straight into new set analysis, best new decks, and all that jazz, I want to do something that's probably a little more boring, but hopefully more immediately useful. I want to talk about where we actually are right now and what actually matters in this moment. Because between now and rotation on April 10th, things are going to change pretty continually. Let's start with the thing that's tripping people up the most: legality. In TCG Live, Ascended Heroes is out. The cards are usable, they're legal in Standard, end of story. But physically, that's where things get weird. Yes, Ascended Heroes products exist. People have cards, or at least a very lucky few do. While a limited number of products were released on Friday, supply was very limited. I talked to the owner of my FLGS, and he said that they sold out of their stock almost immediately. But just because the 12 people whose checkout bot worked fastest have cards, that doesn't mean those cards are legal in physical Standard play yet. That doesn't happen until the main release window, which lines up with the release of the ETBs on February 20th. So right now, we're in this awkward limbo where the cards are legal online, they physically exist, but they're not legal in physical Standard events yet. And if you don't keep that distinction in mind, it becomes really easy to misunderstand the context behind some of the analysis you might be finding online. Sometimes they're talking about live, sometimes they're talking about physical testing, and sometimes they're just theory crafting. That context matters a lot right now. Now layer that on top of what just happened in TCG Live. The Battle Pass rotated, the ladder reset, everyone's back at the bottom. And while this may just be me and my tinfoil hat, it really feels like the daily quest pool rotated also. Which honestly is a bigger deal than it sounds. If you're trying to complete the Ascended Heroes Master set in Live, and this set is huge, especially for a special set, daily quests and the Battle Pass rewards are how you actually get there. So right now, everyone is grinding the same early ranks, working on their collections, and testing new cards in an environment that's inherently unstable. Which means early ladder results are messy. Not useless, just messy. Honestly, I expect things to be very fluid in rank between now and April. But this is the part I actually care about the most. Between now and April 10th, we're in what I'd call an in-between format. Ascended Heroes is legal, rotation hasn't happened yet. So we've got new cards like Mega Meganium EX entering the ecosystem, while older staples like Arven, Iono, and Earthen Vessel are still legal as well. And while we'll get some new sets later in the year that will affect the meta, starting with Mega Evolution Perfect Order in late March, rotation is the only time that cards leave the Standard pool, which makes this objectively the weirdest Standard window we'll see all year. And weird formats do weird things to player behavior. Some people are already starting to move off of rotation-bound staples, experimenting with things like Team Rocket's Petrol instead of Arven or Judge over Iono. Not because they're better, but because they're trying to future-proof. Other people are doing the polar opposite. They're doubling down on cards that are about to rotate out and saying, I'm going to get my reps in while I still can. Same thing with archetypes. Decks like Gardevoir and Goldango are right at that edge where you can either go ahead and move on early, or squeeze every last bit of value out of them while you can. And both approaches make sense. That's why I'm being very cautious about reading too much into early results, because not everyone is playing with the same mindset right now. Alright, let's zoom back out to Ascended Heroes itself. This set is massive, and because it's a special set, meaning no booster boxes, it also feels kind of, well, limited. Completion feels daunting, at least in person, with collectors being forced to rely on ETBs and booster bundles to get any kind of bulk or pull chances. If 151 is any indicator, this also means prices for the chase cards in this set will likely trend higher than Phantasmal Flames or Perfect Order, which both released, or in the case of Perfect Order will release, with booster boxes. Because of this, it's really easy to latch onto whatever's been marketed the hardest, which is why I think it's important to talk about how certain cards matter, not just whether they're strong. Mega Dragonite EX is a great example of this. It's not exciting in the way people usually mean when they say exciting. It's exciting in a much quieter way. A free switch every turn doesn't win games on its own. But if you've played this game for a while, you already know how much a Pokemon comes down to positioning and tempo. What makes Dragonite interesting isn't that you build around it, it's that it naturally fits into the same mental bucket as cards like Fezandipiti, Pesharunt, Mew, and others. Bench support that just makes your turn work more often. And in a format like this, where consistency and flexibility probably matter more than raw power, that kind of effect tends to overperform expectations. Not forever, but right now, yeah, I'm paying attention to it. Specifically, I'm seeing it play a very similar role to Latias EX, but widening the pool to include any Pokemon, not just basics. Of course, there's a trade-off for this. Latias is itself a basic Pokemon, making it instantly searchable and playable via Ball Search or Precious Trolley. But Mega Dragonite is a stage 2, meaning even with acceleration via TM Evo or Rare Candy, you're still taking at least one extra turn to set up the combo. Also, even though Mega Dragonite is sporting a hefty 370 HP, it's still a 3-prize liability hanging out on your bench that's subject to a boss's orders and annihilation from a Gardevoir, Goldango, Raging Bolt, Mega Charizard XEX. You get the picture. But Mega Dragonite isn't the only card I'm paying attention to at the beginning of Ascended Heroes release. Mega Meganium EX and Team Rocket's Honchkrow are interesting for a different reason. People are already trying to build around them. Deck videos have started popping up, and I've already run into both of them and ranked. They're being treated like potential centerpieces. And honestly, that's fine. Every format needs experimentation. But this is also where I think it's important to slow down and separate this card is worth exploring from this card is going to shape the meta long term. Right now, both of these feel like initial tests, not definitive answers. And that's not a knock, it's just the reality of being in a temporary, unstable format. Then there's Mega Charizard Y EX. And yeah, it's Charizard, it's a Mega, it's flashy. Of course people are talking about it. But strategically, this is a story we've seen before. Big attacker, 3 prizes, no built-in infrastructure. When you compare that to something like Charizard EX with Infernal Rain, the difference isn't damage, it's that Infernal Rain accelerates, letting you capitalize on a good board state or rectify a poor one. It smooths bad hands, it stabilizes awkward turns. And assuming you played it from the hand, it hits the board ready to swing. Mega Charizard Y doesn't really do that. Which doesn't make it bad, it just means it's probably not what defines the format early. And I just feel like that distinction matters. So where does that leave us over the next few weeks? Honestly, look, this is not the time to rush. This is a new set, it's a fresh ladder, this is a temporary standard format, and rotation is looming. That's not a recipe for clean answers. It's just not. But it is a recipe for learning. So experiment. Pay attention to what feels consistently good, not just what wins once. Watch how people's card choices start to change as April gets closer. Because the goal right now isn't to be early. It's to understand why things work so that when rotation hits, you're not starting over. Next week, we're going to take a closer look at the Ascended Heroes Battle Pass decks, what they're actually good for, what they're not, and what they tell us about where the format might be heading. And until then, I'm genuinely curious. What cards from Ascended Heroes do you think actually matter right now? Not what looks cool and not what hits the hardest, but what actually shakes up how games play out and what 60 cards people are bringing into Ranked and eventually into their local game store at the end of the month. Let me know, and I'll see you next week.